So we're starting the Gemara towards the bottom of Daf Lamed Amud Beis. We're talking about the halacha of where you could put an Eruv or l'kayim bebeis hapras. It said in the Mishnah that a kayin is allowed to put an Eruv in a beis hapras. What's a beis hapras? An area that had a caver in it, and then it was plowed out, but there still might be remnants of bones of the dead body there, so therefore Chachamim will geizer that a kayin should not go in a beis hapras. So you're allowed to put the Eruv Tchumen there even for a kayin. So the Gemara explains why. Rav Yudah Mashmuel explained, a person when he walks in the beis hapras, as long as he blows and he doesn't see any remnants of bones that he's walking on, we could rely on that and we allow him to walk there. Rav Yehuda Barami Mishmei de Rav Yehuda Amar beis hapras shenidosh, a beis hapras that many people had already walked through it, tahir. It's already tahir. The halacha of the bones, remnants of a mace, is that if it's not the size of a barley, doesn't cause tumah. So once many people walked over that area, we rely on the fact that it was already crushed and there's no remnants of a bone that's the size of a barley. Rabbi Yehuda imav beis hakvaris. In the Mishnah it said that Rabbi Yehuda said even in a beis hakvaris itself, a kohen could put the Eruv Tchumen. And the Mishnah explained it. The Gemara here quotes it also from a Braisa. Tana, we learned in a Braisa, how does a kohen put his Eruv in a beis hakvaris if you can't go into a beis hakvaris? So the answer is v'pnei sheyachol lachutz. He could put up a mechitza, a partition around him, v'leilech b'shida teva umigdal. And he goes there, whether in a shida, which is some kind of a carriage, or a teva, a box, or a migdal, or some kind of a closet that he enters into, and that's how he walks in there. So that's the heter, and he won't become tummy. So the Gemara says, kasavar. So what does that mean? Rabbi Yehuda holds, oil zarok shmei oil. If you're inside a tent, or in this case a box, whatever, but it's movable, it's considered to be a partition. And this is a machlokes. There's a machlokes in a lot of places in Shas, whether a partition, a tent, and it's moving around, is that considered to be a good partition? Well, beplukte, the hani tanoi, and this is a machlokes of the following tanoim. The Tanya, hanichnas la'eretz ha'amim, a person that enters into chutz la'aretz. Chachamim were geyser in chutz la'aretz, that the ground in chutz la'aretz is metame, because goyim in that time they would have a nafel, a child that was born and didn't live. They would just bury him anywhere. So there was a gzeira chazal were geyser that anywhere you walk into eretz ha'amim, there's a tumah. So if you walk into eretz ha'amim b'shida teva migdal, and you're in a carriage, in a box, in a closet, Rabbi metame, Rabbi says it doesn't protect you from the tumah, you're still tumah. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda metay. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda says you're protected inside this oil, and therefore you're tar. What's the source of their machlekes? Mar savar oil zarok lav shmei oil. One opinion is that because it's oil zarok, it's not an oil. It's movable. It's not a zarok. Literally means a thrown oil, but it means movable. That's what it means there. An oil that's moving around is not an oil. Mar savar oil zarok shmei oil. And oil zarok, if it's being moved around, it still is considered to be an oil. So the same machlokes applies over here, but again to Eruv Tchumen. Could a kohen rely on this heter of walking in with a shida, teva, or migdal to be able to put his Eruv Tchumen in a beis hakvaris? There's a machlokes Rashi and Taisus, but again to the pshat in this Gemara. If you remember, we had the machlokes in the Mishnah between Sumchus and the Rabbanon. Do you have to put an Eruv that you yourself could use, or is it enough that you put an Eruv that someone else could eat? So Rashi says, same machlokes applies to a beis hakvaris. Even if the kohen himself can't go into the beis hakvaris, but he's putting it in a place that someone else is going to be able to go in there and use that food. So Rashi says this whole Gemara is going according to Sumchus that says that you yourself have to be able to use it. Taisvus disagrees, not over here but before in Daf Chav Zayin. Taisvus says that the whole machlokes was benegeh to the food itself, whether it has to be food that you could eat or someone else. Benegeh to the place, it has to be a place that you could at least enter into that area. Even if you can't eat it and someone else could use the food, but at least you have to be able to enter there. So therefore this is even according to the Rabbanon. So the Gemara weiter, the Tanya we learned in the Braisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ma'arvin lekoyin tahir, you can make an Eruv for a koyin tahir, betrume tahira, and he's using trume tahira, bekaver. Even if it's placed down, even if this trume is placed down on a kaver itself. See here we're not talking about a beis hakvaris. We're talking about a single kaver. If you're going to place the trume tahira on a kaver, you still could use it for the koyin for Eruv Tchumen. So this is a Pella Mamish. The Gemara is going to ask here, how does this work? Hey, Chiyazil, what did we say? How is he going to be able to go there and not become tummy from this cave? B'shida tevo migdal. He goes into a box, a carriage, or a closet, but that doesn't help you. For hakivin the achsa. The moment you put down the truma onto the kaver, itamya. The truma itself becomes tummy. So if the truma becomes tummy from the kaver, how is the kain allowed to eat truma tmeya? What's the halach of truma tmeya? We learned in Masechta Shabbos that you have to burn it. Kain's not allowed to eat it. So the truma became tummy. So how could this be used for Eruv? And for the Gemara, b'shaloi hochshara. We're talking about food that never became susceptible to tumah. In order to become susceptible to tumah, it has to come in contact with 7 different kinds of liquids, water or different liquids that make it susceptible to tumah. So let's say you put down a fruit, apples that never came in contact with water, so it doesn't become tamei. Or even if you put down cake or something that was made with fruit juice and not with water, so therefore it never became susceptible to tumah. So therefore the truma itself is not tamei when you put it down on the kaver. Now the question is, how is the kohen going to pick up this truma from the kaver? The moment he's going to put his hand there, isn't he going to become tummy? His hand is going above the kaver, that makes his hand tummy. So how's he going to get it? The heichi maisilo. How is it possible for the kohen to take it? Answers the Gemara, bepshute kli eitz the loy mekabli tumah. He's using a kind of utensil, a wooden utensil that doesn't have a receptacle in it, and therefore it's not mekabel tumah. That's how he gets it.
He picks it up with something.
Huh?
He picks it up with something. Whatever.
A what? Tongues, whatever. It
has to be something that's not mekabel tumah.
Right. Pshute kli eitz. It has to be something that doesn't have a shape of a. Okay, something like that. Okay, very good. Frekte Gemara, even if it's not makabel tumah, so now if you would be using a spoon, let's say, that's makabel tumah, then the spoon would become tameh, and then you're holding the spoon would make you tameh. But over here we're saying, no, the spoon does not become tameh, it's a pshute kliyetz, it's just something that's flat, and it's not makabel tumah. But the Gemara asks, there's still another problem. V'ha komahil. But still, this even if it's something which is flat, once it becomes an oil, it goes above the kaver and it serves as an oil. As long as something is a tefach, if something has a covering of a tefach, so it's over the kaver, it becomes an oil and it's makabel tumah, and then it'll make you tummy. So what's the difference if it's flat or if it's a keli? So the Gemara answers the maisilo achayre, or according to other girsis, it's mashma. This is how Rashi learns achudei. The point is that you're not bringing this utensil over the kaver flat, that it should have the width of a tefach to make an oil. You're bringing it on its edge, and therefore a chude on its sharper edge, or on backwards, whatever, in a way that there's no oil of a tefach. So therefore there's no problem of you making an oil over here. So B'kitzur, the Gemara finds a way how a kohen could put the truma on the kaver itself, and still he'll be able to access it for his erev tchumen. So the Gemara asks, if you have all of these ways how you can do this, my time with the Rabbanan. Why would the Rabbanan disagree to this? In the Brayse it says, Rav Yehuda Aimer. So the Rabbanan says, you're not allowed to do this. Why not? If this is the way Rav Yehuda says it's possible, what would be the reason Rabbanan disagree? And answers the Gemara, Kasavri, the Rabbanan hold, Aser liknois bayis b'yisurei. You're not allowed to acquire a home. In this case, it means you're not allowed to acquire the place for the purpose of erev tchumen with something which is asar bahana. What does asar bahana mean? So Rashi over here explains that a kaver, it's asar to have anah from it. Gemara learns out from a pasuk it says by Miriam, Sham, there's a Gzeira Shavah that the Gemara learns out that a kaver, you're not allowed to have anah from a kaver. So this person is using the kaver as a place for his erev tchumen. He's establishing, what's the concept of Erev Tchumen? You're establishing your dwelling there, and you're having a nah from the kaver. So Rabbanan says, fine, the kohen won't become tamei, but still you're having a nah from this place for your Erev Tchumen. You're not allowed to have a nah from the kaver.
It's not a kohen anymore.
Huh?
It's not a kohen anymore.
It's not? Nothing to do with kohen, correct? The issue is not the kohen, the tumah. The issue is that you're having a nah from the kaver, correct?
I'm just going to kohen, here brings kohen.
Right, so it's lav dafke b'negei to kohen. This chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda, he said it. So Rashi says that lohidiyacha koichet Rabbi Yehuda. So he's telling you, even a kohen, you have this eitzah. But be'etzem the machlokes b'negei to the shita of the Rabbanan has nothing to do with kohen. Fact the Gemara. So if so, meklal the Rabbi Yehuda sava mutter. Rabbi Yehuda hold that you're allowed to have anah from a beis hakvaros. There's no argument about this. You're not allowed to have anah from a kaver. Answers the Gemara, Kasavar, Rabbi Yehuda holds, mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu. You're doing over here, this dwelling, you're establishing there is for the purpose of a mitzvah. A mitzvah is not lav lahanis nitnu. It's not considered to be a hana. The Gemara says this in many places, that even though a person could have a hana from a mitzvah, but the purpose of a mitzvah is not the hana. The purpose of the mitzvah is the Eibishter's ratzon of the mitzvah. So therefore, mitzvah is lav lahanis nitnu. So this Inyan, the Chiddush of our Gemara is, what you want to ask something?
No, but he has a no.
Doesn't matter, but the mitzvah, but he's not doing it for that purpose though. When a person has a no, but he's not doing it for that purpose, it's not considered to be that I'm having the hana. Happens. The hana happens with mashal. Person hears shofar, right? So the musical sound of the shofar for some people is a big hana. But if you're not doing it for that purpose, the hana that comes memela is not I'm having hana. The hana happens. So the same thing over here. Hayais, the person when he does a mitzvah is doing it for the mitzvah. So therefore the hana is happening memela. The chiddush of our Gemara is 2 points. First of all, we're talking about a mitzvah midrabanan. There's a big machlekes rishonim whether this klal of mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu is only going to get to mitzvahs deraisa or even mitzvahs derabanan. Here we're talking about a mitzvah midrabanan. We'll see in a moment which mitzvah we're talking about. Which mitzvah are we talking about over here? Eid of Tchumen itself. Eid of Tchumen itself is not a mitzvah. We'll see in a moment. The Gemara will explain that you're making the Eid of for a mitzvah. But we're talking over here about a mitzvah midrabanan. That's one chiddush. Okay, let's see weiter in the Gemara. I'll tell you the second chiddush in a moment. Let's go weiter. Fragt the Gemara. So this statement that's brought in the Gemara many times in the name of Rava. Mitzvah lav lahanis nitnu. That mitzvahs were not given for the sake of the person's own pleasure. Leime ketanoi. So shall we now say ketanoi amra l'shmaite? That Rava said his statement and it's going to be dependent on this machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda says mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu, and the Rabbanan say no, that it's an issue that you're having a no from the kaver, even though it's for a purpose of a mitzvah. Amalach Rava. So Rava answers, no, it depends. Which mitzvah are we talking about over here? If you're going to say that you only make an Eid of Tchumen if you need to walk that distance out of the Tchum for the purpose of a mitzvah. That's the mitzvah we're talking about. What is the person making the Eid of Tchumen for? He's making the Eid of Tchumen to go to a chasana, he's making the Eid of Tchumen to go to Bimenachem Avel, to take care of a mace, or whatever it is. Eid of Tchumen for the purpose of a mitzvah. If that's the only way you can make an Eid of Tchumen, so then you're right. The kul alme mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu. So then everybody would agree that there's no issue with making the Eid, because the mitzvah is not a hana. V'hacha b'haka miflagi. Rava says, I would say that the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan is about this itself. Mar savar ein marvin el advar mitzvah. Rabbi Yehuda holds the whole hatter to make an Eid of Tchumen was only if you're making it for the purpose of a mitzvah. Mar savar marvin afilu dvar reshus. And the Rabbanan hold that you can make an Eid of even just for anything, even for dvar reshus, even for something that's voluntary, and therefore has nothing to do with a mitzvah b'chlal. So therefore it's a problem to use the kaver for this hana. So what do you see over here? What's the dvar mitzvah that a person makes an Eidah for? Person makes, Rashi brings it over here. If you take a look at Rashi, mitzvah lav lahanis nitnu, Rashi says a person makes the Eidah to go to a Beis HaMishteh. Now, Beis HaMishteh is, there's a hanas, what kind of a hana does a person have in a Beis HaMishteh? Person goes and joins a chasana, and he's eating and he's dancing. There's a hanas haguf that a person has by a mitzvah. There's a famous Ran that says, when you get to this klal of mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu, that there's an exception. If the mitzvah you're doing is actually a hanas haguf, so then a yes yaguf is mamish nena from the very mitzvah itself. Over here you say that the mitzvah, the hana of the mitzvah is, there is a hana on the mitzvah. And therefore if a person makes a neder that he's not going to go to a mikveh, and then he has a mitzvah to go to a mikveh. Going into the mikveh, if it's a cool mikveh and he wants to cool himself off because his guf is being nena from the mitzvah, we don't use the klal of mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu. So over here, a person is going, using this Eid of Tchumen, and for a mitzvah, for what mitzvah? One of the mitzvahs is for a Beis HaMishteh, and there's a hanas haguf. And still the Gemara applies the klal of mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu. This is the Rashi's quoting from the Gemara later. This is a Gemara later over here on Daf Pei Beis in Eiruvin. Beis HaMishteh. That's the mitzvah we're talking about. One of the mitzvahs. It's the Beis HaOvel, the Beis HaMishteh. So over here you see that... You don't need anything. Okay, I'm not sure if that's a mitzvah though. It's a nice thing. It's obviously Yisrael. But the mitzvah we're talking about over here is Simchas Chasam V'Kala. Maybe, okay, maybe that's also a mitzvah. The mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael, midrabanan. We're talking about it. There's no mitzvah min ha-Torah to go to a chasana, but it's a mitzvah midrabanan, part of Gemilas Chesed, to go to the Beis HaMishta, Beis HaOvel. It's a mitzvah midrabanan, the pashtus. Kopana, the point is, even though there is a hanas aguf, but the actual placing down of the Eruv itself is not a hanas aguf. You place down the Eruv in order to be able to go to the Beis HaMishta, which will be a hanas aguf. But this itself is not the hanas aguf. A person goes to the mikveh and it's cold and he gets cooled off and he's having hana. Right then, he's hearing shofar, and as he hears the sound of the shofar, right then he enjoys the sound of the shofar. This itself is a hanas aguf. Then you say mitzvahs is hana if it's hanas aguf, but not over here if you're putting down the Erit Chumen and it's only guiding that you should be able to go to a Beis HaMishta, which is going to be a hanas aguf. But this itself is not a hanas aguf.
You have a mitzvah of Einik Shabbos. The whole mitzvah is
Correct. So over there, mitzvahs is lohanis nitn. According to this Ran, this is the word of the Ran.
Well, according to everyone, you must.
Yeah.
That's the whole Indian. That's the musig of Einik Shabbos is to have a no.
Correct.
Except the Shaila is the Baal Shteitach. The Alter Rebbe didn't have a Tainug and didn't have a taste in food. So how did he have?
Okay, so Shabbos he mustama brought back the taste and Timakaim the mitzvah, shame the mitzvah. Sagt the Gemara weiter. So we have a pshat over here in the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon. What are they arguing about? What is the purpose that the Eid of Tchumen could be made? Could it be made only for a mitzvah? If it's only for a mitzvah, so then mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu. It's not a problem to use the kaver. If it could be made even for the shus, so you can't use a kaver for that purpose. So now the Gemara goes further. Rav Yosef. So this that Rav Yosef says, Eiruvin el ledvar mitzvah. A mitzvah could, a Eruv could only be used for a mitzvah. So now, it comes out that what Rav Yosef says is a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon. Amalach Rav Yosef answers, not necessarily. The kula almei marvin el ledvar mitzvah. Really, everybody would agree that you only make an Eruv for the purpose of a mitzvah. And everybody agrees that mitzvahs were not given for the purpose of hana. So therefore there should be no problem to use a kaver for the Eruv Tchumen. And here the argument is as follows. Mar Savar, Rabbi Yehuda holds, Kivin the Kanele Eruv, once you establish the Eruv at Bein HaShmoshes, the person doesn't need it to be safeguarded there afterwards. Once it's kind of there then, by the time of Bein HaShmoshes, even if the food is not going to be there later, it doesn't matter. The Eruv was chal. So therefore, you're using it then for the purpose of the mitzvah and not afterwards. Umar Salvar, but Rabbanan say, Nichele de Mintra. Even after the person established his Eruv at Bein HaShmoshes, the person is interested to safeguarding the food there even afterwards, that in case he wants to use it, he'll be able to go and use it. The Yitzrich Achale, if he'll need it, he'll be able to go eat. Maybe when he's traveling, he'll taka need that food. Komtais, that he's using the kaver for himself, for his own purpose, stam, to eat the food, even though he doesn't need it for the Eruv anymore. And therefore, you can't use it, the kaver is also ba'ana, so we don't allow a person to put it there in the first place. Zok the Mishnah. Now the Mishnah comes back to talking about what kind of foods is a person allowed to use for his Eruv. Ma'arvin b'dmai. You're allowed to use dmai for an Eruv Tchumen. What's dmai? We've learned many times about dmai. It's produce that comes from a Amaretz, and there's a suffix whether he took the maisers properly. So you can make an Eruv with dmai. Also, Ma'aser Rishon, which goes to a Levi. After a Levi gets his Ma'aser Rishon, what does he have to do with it? He has to take off Truma and give to a Kayin. Or Ma'aser Sheni, the Hektish, you could also use Ma'aser Sheni or Hektish and Niftu, that were redeemed. Va'kayanim, B'chala or B'truma, the Kayanim could use Chala or Truma. Avaloi B'tevel, you can't use produce that Ma'aser wasn't taken from it yet. V'loi B'Ma'aser Rishon Shaloi Nitla Trumasai. A Levi has Ma'aser Rishon and he did not take off the Truma from it, so it's not yet fit for eating, so you can't use it. V'loi b'Ma'aser Sheni v'Hektish shaloi niftu. Or Ma'aser Sheni and Hektish that were not redeemed, and you're not allowed to use it yet, so you can't use it for a native. That's the Mishnah. Frek the Gemara, Demai. So you're saying that a person could use Demai for the Eruv Hole Chazile. The person is not allowed to eat the Demai. Answers the Gemara, Migu di iboy mafkelu lenichse. Since if this person would be mafkir all of his possessions, v'hava ani, and then he would be poor, v'chazule, and then once he's poor, a ani that has nothing else to eat or doesn't have enough food to eat is allowed to eat demai. Hashtanami chazile. So therefore now, even before he was mafkir as nechasim, since he has this ability, it's considered to be food that's fit for him to eat, and therefore it works for the Eruv. And the Gemara brings the source of this inyan. The Tanan, it says in the Mishnah, Machilin esoaniyim demai ve'es achsanya. Poor people, you can give them to eat demai, and also achsanya, which refers to the soldiers, that Yiddish soldiers that are fighting and they don't have enough food to eat, so you're allowed to feed them demai. Besachsanya demai. Okay, Tosfos, by the way, says that this Gemara is all going according to Sumchis, right? Because Sumchis says that it has to be fit for you to eat. So therefore the Gemara has to give the hezbollah that you yourself could be mafka your money and you'll be able to eat it. According to the Rabbanon, the very fact that I could feed aniyim, even if I am not going to become an ani, the very fact that I could use this food for someone else is good enough that the food is fit for a native.
But the Chiddush is that it's in the potential for you.
The what?
It's in the potential for you to be.
Correct. According to Sumchis, that's good enough. The Gemara said before the same thing when you get to a Nazir and Yayin.
Right.
That a Nazir could be shayel on his Naziris and drink the wine, even according to Sumchis, that's good enough. Amar Avone Tana. We learned in the Brais, B'shama Yoimrim, Ei Machilin es Aniyim Dmai. You're not allowed to give aniyim to eat demai. Beis Hillel Oimrim machilin es aniyim demai. Beis Hillel says no, aniyim could eat demai. So what we're saying here is, of course, based on Beis Hillel's opinion that aniyim could eat demai, and therefore you yourself could make yourself an ani for this purpose. The next thing it said in the Mishnah, v'maiser rishain shenitla trumasai. The Levi has maiser rishain. He took off the truma of this maiser rishain properly, so he can use it for the Eid of Tchumen. The Gemara. Now this whole next Gemara that we're going to learn until the Mishnah is a repetition of a Gemara that we had already twice before. Zok the Gemara. Pshit, obviously, if it's done properly, you have Ma'aser Rishon, you took off the Truma, why shouldn't you be allowed to use it for an Eruv? And for the Gemara, what happened over here? The Levi actually came before the Kohen to take his Ma'aser. Usually you give the truma first and then you take the meiser. The Levi actually came when it was still in the stalks, and at that point it's not even chayiv in truma yet. And the Levi came and took his share. V'nitlo mimenu trumas meiser. So now the Levi has this, and he separated trumas meiser, but v'nitlo mimenu truma gedayla. The regular truma gedayla, the regular truma that goes to the kohen before you take your meiser, that was never given. In other words, there are two trumas. There's the truma you give that the Yisrael has to give directly to the Kohen, and then the Levi has to give from his meiser. He has to give trumas meiser. He has to give a tenth to the Kohen from his meiser that he got. So you took off trumas meiser, but the truma gedayla that's usually given before was never given. So that's the chiddush over here, that you could still use it for Erev Tchumen. And why could you, even though you didn't take off the truma gedayla yet? If you went, if the Levi went and took the Ma'aser Rishon while it was still in the stalks, before Truma was taken, Patam Truma Gedayla. Now the Levi doesn't have to give Truma Gedayla. Shenema v'harimaisem yimenu Trumas Hashem. This is talking to the Levi, that he has to give a Truma from his Ma'aser. Ma'aser min ha-Ma'aser. He has to give a tenth from his Ma'aser, which is what's called Trumas ha-Ma'aser. So we darshan from this pasuk, Meiser min ha-Meiser amarti lach. A Levi has to give the tenth to the Kohen from his Meiser, but v'loi truma gedayla. V'trumas Meiser min ha-Meiser. A Levi will never have to give both. If the truma gedayla was not taken before, we're not going to obligate the Levi to give that truma gedayla and the truma of his Meiser. He gives a tenth for the Kohen, and that's good enough. The truma gedayla is not obligated to give. So that was the chiddush of our Mishnah. The Truma Gedayla was not given, and still it's going to be right to be used for the Erev Tchumen. So now Rav Papa says to Abaye, what did we say before? What happened over here? When did the Levi come to take his Meiser? When there were still stalks of Tua. Okay? So he asks him, only when there were stalks? How about Ihachi Afilig Dimai Bekri Nami? How about if the Levi came along after they took the kernels and they separated it and they created a pile of the wheat, and at this point it's already chayiv and truma. When it's still in the stalks, it's not chayiv and truma yet. But once you created it in the pile and you took out the kernels, and now it's already chayiv and truma. How about if the Levi comes at this point before the kohen to take his meiser? Maybe you should say as well that he doesn't have to give truma gedayla anymore. You just darshan from a pasuk that a Levi only gives trumas meiser, but the truma gedayla he doesn't have to give. So Abaye answers him, no. Alecha omakra, regarding your question, the pasuk says, Mikol masrei seichem tarimu es kol trumas Hashem. that a Levi has to give kol trumas Hashem. There's an extra word kol. He has to give all truma. Kol means including even what was missed from before. Okay, so here I see that you have to give even from what was missed from before. So what is the Gemara basically saying now? It depends when the Levi came and took his meiser before the Kayin. If the Levi came when it was still in the stalks, so then he's not going to have to give that truma that the Kayin didn't get. But if the Levi came once you have the kernels in a pile, and that's when he took his meiser, then the Levi is going to have to give that truma that the Kayin didn't get. So the Gemara asks the question, Umara Isa, what do you see? Why are you making this distinction in this way? So the Gemara answers very simple. Hai idgin, v'hai loy idgin. When it's already in the pile and you have the kernel, so this is considered to be grain, and it already is fit for the chiyuv of truma. So even though the Levi came first, but it was already chayiv in truma. So therefore, the Levi has to give that truma that wasn't given. If you come and take from the stalks, it's not yet grain. It's not called grain yet. And therefore, it was never chayiv in truma. So when the Levi took it, he took something that was never chayiv in truma. So even though later it became grain, now the Levi doesn't have to give it anymore. That's the chiluk over here. Gemara goes to the next case of the Mishnah. You have Ma'aseh Sheni or Hektish. It was redeemed. It could be used for an Eruv. Asks the Gemara, Pshita, of course, why not? It's redeemed, it's fit to use, why shouldn't it be good for a native? Answers the Gemara, you paid the principal to redeem this, but you didn't pay a chaimish that you usually have to give when you redeem. But Kamash Mulan, the Chiddush of our Mishnah is the Ena chaimish makif. Although you didn't pay that chaimish, but it's not going to uphold the release of this Ma'aseh Sheni and Hektish, and it could be used even before you pay up that chaimish. The next case in the Mishnah of a loibet tevel. You can't use produce that my trumas or maisis wasn't taken from it. Frekt the Gemara pshita, obviously not. Tevel is asa to eat. Answers the Gemara, leitzriche betevel tovel midrabanan. The chiddush of our Mishnah is even a tevel that's only tevel midrabanan. What's a case where it's only tevel midrabanan? Produce that's only chayiv and meiser midrabanan. The kagoyin shezaroi ba'otzit she'ein enokiv. It was planted in a flower pot that has no holes in it. So because it has no holes in it, so it's not receiving nourishment from the ground. So therefore, it's not chayiv and trumas and maisus minatayre. It's only chayiv and derabanan. So therefore, this is the chiddush of our Mishnah that even though it's only asim and derabanan, you can't use it for the erev tchumen. The next case, v'loy b'maiser risha shalinitla trumasa. You have maiser rishain and you didn't take off the truma, so you can't use it for a Eirov. Again, the Gemara asks Pshita. If the Levi did not take off the truma from this meiser, of course he can't use it. And for the Gemara, we go back to the case before. We're not talking about the truma that the Levi has to take off. We're talking about the original truma gedoyla. Loitzriche shegdimai bekri. The Levi went and he took his meiser in the pile of the kernels. V'nitla mimena trumas meiser, v'loy nitla mimena truma gedoyla. So he did take off the trumas meiser. That's not what the Mishnah is talking about. The truma gedoyla was never taken off. So ma'od the teime keda'amalei Rav Papa la'abai. I would think, like Rav Papa suggested before to Abaye, that even in such a case, you're not obligated to take off Truma Gedayle either. Kamash Malan, Kiddushani lay, the Chiddush of our Mishnah is, like Abaye answered, and what did Abaye tell him? That if you took it from a time when it was already Chayiv and Truma, you do have to give that Truma, and therefore you can't use it for an Eidov. The next case of our Mishnah was, V'loi b'Ma'aseh Sheni v'Hektish shalei niftu. Ma'aseh Sheni and Hektish that were not redeemed, it's not fit for use, so you can't use it for the Eidov. Frek the Gemara pshita. This is obvious. Answers the Gemara, leitzriche shepadan v'leipadan kil chasan. He redeemed them, but not properly, not according to the way it's required to be redeemed. And the Gemara explains, Maiser shepade al gava simain. Maiser, he redeemed it with a coin, but the coin doesn't have a picture on it. But Achmana Amar, the lashon of the pasuk is v'tzarta kesef. V'tzarta literally means you should tie a bundle of money in your hands. But we darshan from this, kesef sheyesh alav tzura. It has to be money that's choshev money. Money that has a picture on it is choshev money, and that's the money that you use to redeem meiser. So he didn't redeem it properly. Hektish shechil al gav karka. He redeemed it using to exchange the hektish with a piece of land. It has to be like money, which is a movable item, or money, but not karka, which is stationary. That cannot be used to redeem hektish. And that's what our Mishnah is teaching us, that in such a case, the redemption did not take effect, and therefore you can't use it. Okay, one more piece in Gemara. Ready? Sagt the Mishnah, Hashileach Eiruvin biyad cheres shoyte v'katan. A person sends his Eirov to go place it down in that area in the hands of a cheres shoyte or a katan. Or biyad misha eina moide be'eirov. Or he's sending it with somebody that does not agree to the whole mitzvah of Eirov. The Gemara will explain. Eina Eirov. So that's not an Eirov. We don't trust a cheres shoyte v'katan or a person that's not moide that'll put it there. Or there's another issue as well, as we'll see in the Gemara. How about if you give it a cheres shoyte v'katan, but then you make a shliach to go and receive it from this cheres shoyte v'katan? Okay, so someone else is going to pick it up from him or receive it from him to put it down in the place. That is a Eirov. So then you could rely on that, and it is a good Eirov. Frag the Gemara, v'katan loy. You can't rely on a child to go and put down the Eirov for you for the Eirov Tchumen. But Rav Huna said, cotton, goyves Eirov. A cotton could collect the food that's needed for an Eirov. So we do rely on a cotton. Answers the Gemara, like Kashya. It's not a question. Kan beiruve tchumen, kan beiruve chatzeres. There's a difference if it's Eirov Tchumen or it's Eirov chatzeres. Regarding an Eirov Tchumen, we don't rely on a cotton. And Eirov chatzeres, you do. What's the difference? So Rashi explains, the issue with a cotton is not only that you can't rely on him because he doesn't have das, so you can't trust him that he's actually going to bring it there, but there's another issue. By Eirov Tchumen, how does an Eirov Tchumen work? You're making a kinyan, sort of. You're acquiring that place for yourself to be able to walk from there another 2,000 amas. A cotton can't make a kinyan, even if you trust him. But he doesn't have a koyach to make a kinyan. So therefore a cotton can't make an Eirov Tchumen. An Eirov Chatzeres, you don't have to make a kinyan. What's the concept of Eirov Chatzeres? That everybody has food that they're sharing in one area, and therefore now everyone is partners in one house. There's no kinyan that necessarily takes place. It's just a shittuf that everyone is there. So if a cotton takes the food and places it down there, it takes place automatically whether the cotton can make a kinyan or not. That's Rashi's pshat. Tosfos says differently. Tosfos says Eirov Tchumen is more stringent than Eirov Chatzeres. Why is that? Because even though we paskin that Tchumen is midrabanon, but there's an asmachta, there's a makir and a pasuk for the concept of tchumen. Mashenkin Eirov Chatzeres is totally a gzeira midrabanon. So therefore, we're more machmer for Eirov Tchumen. That's Tosfos' pshat.
A cotton could be kind of dirt.
No kinyan for a cotton. A cotton can't be makna. You can't make a kinyan. A cotton could be kinyan for himself, but he can't be kinyan. He can't acquire the place for you. Okay. Zok the Gemara. Oy biyad misha einay meide be'eirov. We said a person that's not maided to Eirov can't be an agent to deliver the food for the Eirov there either. Man, who is this? Amar Rav Chisda, Kutoi. These are the Kutim. The Kutim were people that only believed in Torah Shebiksav and not in Torah Shebal Peh. So we don't trust him that he's going to deliver it there. He doesn't believe in it, so he might not deliver it. Then it said in the Mishnah of him, if you give it to a cotton and then you tell someone else to pick it up from the cotton, then that's a good Eirov. So the Gemara asks, what do you gain by this? There's still an issue with the cotton. If you don't trust the cotton to put the Eirov down in its place, even if you hire someone else to get it from the cotton, how do you know the cotton is going to deliver it to that person? Answers the Gemara, you're right. Kedamar Rav Chisda, we're going to have to say like Rav Chisda said in another place, you're actually seeing the cotton bring it to that person. So you have a neighbor and you're watching him bring it to your neighbor, and your neighbor is going to go and bring it to that place. But if you don't, over here in our Mishnah as well, we're talking about this person that receives it from the cotton, and you see how this person gets it from the cotton. Why aren't we afraid that this person that took it from the cotton, maybe he didn't take it for the purpose to actually go and put it down? You're not watching the food are being brought to its place. So even if you hired this person to pick it up from the cotton and bring it there, how do you know that person is going to fulfill your shlichus and bring it there?
And who gave over the message?
That
person. The cotton gives over the message?
No. You hired that person before. You appointed that person before. You called them on the phone and you told them, I'm sending over my son to bring you the food. Please deliver it. And I know you're going there with you. So you're driving over there. Please drop it off there. So you hired him bimefore.
Anytime you ask a guy to do it, who's
And a chanami. The Gemara is asking us general shaila now. If you appoint a shliach, if you don't see him himself, how could you rely on him? Actually, though, I don't remember now if it's Tosfos or other Rishonim point out that l'chayre, you see already right from the beginning of the Mishnah that you could rely on a shliach, because the Mishnah says you can't rely on a cheres shoyte v'katan. So you see that on a regular shliach you could rely. So l'chayre, the question of the Gemara is by any shliach and a chanami. One second.
Not only here.
Yeah, and a chanami, any shliach. So the Gemara says, Kedam Rav Yechiel, Chazake Shliach Oiser Shlichusai. There's a chazake that a shliach fulfills his shlichus. Ochanami chazake shliach Oiser Shlichusai. There's a chazake that a shliach fulfills his shlichus. Okay, but there is a certain chiddush here in this case. What's the chiddush? Usually, you appoint a shliach to do the entire shlichus. So this person feels you're relying on me for the whole thing, so it's obvious that there's a chazakah that he's going to fulfill it. The chiddush of our Gemara is, even though you're not relying on him for the whole thing, you sent a cotton to deliver it to him, and he only has to take one leg of the trip to do it for you, so he doesn't feel as responsible for it. So even in this case, the Gemara is saying that there's a chazakah that the shliach will fulfill his shlichus. Now the Gemara brings the source of where Rav Chisda and Rav Yechiel said their statements. Where was the original place where they said what they said? And on the following Braisa. The Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, Nasnai lepil. You gave your Eruv, the food of your Eruv, to an elephant. And the elephant is going to bring it to the place where the Eruv has to be. Lekaif, a monkey that's bringing your Eruv. Rashi says, Pa'omim sheheim ulamadim. Talking about an elephant that's trained, a monkey that's trained, and it could deliver your Eruv in the right place. It's not an Eruv, you can't rely on them. But if your elephant or monkey is delivering it to someone else, and that person is going to deliver it, so then it is an Eruv. So over here is where the question was asked. Maybe the elephant or the monkey, they're trained, and you gave it to them, but maybe they never delivered it to that person. You're watching your elephant or monkey go to deliver it to that person. And then they asked the question, maybe that person that took it from the elephant and monkey will not actually take it and go and deliver it and put it where it's supposed to go. We rely on the fact that the shliach will fulfill the shlichus. We don't rely on the elephant and the monkey. And lahavdul, a child, that has to be oimid v'reyeyu. But we rely on the person that is going to fulfill his shlichus.